My name is Kevin. I'm one of the event hosts here at Powell's Books. And before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. And if you don't already do so, please follow us on our social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as our YouTube channel. Tonight, we're excited to welcome Emme Lund in conversation with Davey Davis. In her astounding debut novel, The Boy with a Bird in His Chest, Emme Lund tells us the story of Owen Tanner. Owen is what medical forums would call a terror. Between his ribs lives a chatty bird named Gail. And from the moment Gail is discovered, his mother knows that she has to hide him away from the world. After a decade spent in hiding, Owen takes a brazen trip outdoors in the middle of a forest fire, and his life is upended forever. Suddenly, Owen is forced to flee the home and hide in plain sight with his uncle and cousin in Washington State. There, he feels the joy of finding a family among friends, of sharing the bird in his chest, and being embraced fully, of falling in love. And he also experiences the heartbreak of rejection, but ultimately finding a spark of happiness while living his truth. But the threat of the Army of Acronyms, as they're called, is a constant looming presence, making Owen wonder if he'll ever find a way out of the cycle of fear. A heartbreaking yet hopeful novel about the things that make us unique and lovable. The Boy with a Bird in His Chest grapples with the fear, depression, and feelings of isolation that comes with believing that we will never be loved, let alone accepted for who we truly are, and learning to live fully and openly regardless. Lund will be joined in conversation by Davey Davis. They're the author of The Earthquake Room and the forthcoming novel X, which will be coming out from Catapult this June. They're joining us tonight from Brooklyn. We thank them for being a part of tonight's event. This evening event includes a Q&A from the audience. You can use that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question at any time. And if someone has typed a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, you can even upvote that particular question. And perhaps most importantly, please support Emme and Powell's by purchasing a copy of The Boy with the Bird in His Chest from us. A link to buy that book, as well as a link to buy Davey's book, will be shared in the chat a couple of times this evening. Emme, Davey, we're so excited to welcome you both tonight.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Thanks so much for having us. I'm excited.
I'm so excited.
Hi, Davey.
Hi, it's been a long time.
Yes, it has been. Davey and I are old friends, knew each other back in Oakland. I mean, what, a decade ago now. So,
Yeah.
So it's been separated by the continental United States, but reunited on Zoom today. So that's nice.
Yeah, and I'm very excited. I like, as I was preparing for asking you questions about the book, like this book just has so much of a history for you, like as a writer, like and for me, like it goes way back. So I'm excited to talk about it. There's lots.
Yes, I'm excited to talk about it too. Should I start with a short reading and then we can do some light conversation?
Yes,
that works.
Perfect.
Perfect. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the beginning of the book to kind of help set the mood and let listeners know kind of what they're in for, so they can have some context for what we're talking about. So the book follows Owen, who is born with a bird living inside of his chest. Her name is Gail. She talks to him, she tells him jokes. And his mother is very worried about what will happen if he's discovered, if this secret of his is found out. And so she hides him away in the house. She calls police and social workers and doctors, the Army of Acronyms. So I'm going to read just early on. This is right towards the end of this period when he's been hidden away for 10 years now, and he's 14 years old. At the end of those 10 years, 2 days before his 14th birthday, the urge to be outside was a burning in Owen's chest that had grown to a forest fire, his whole insides ablaze with the desire. Gail said nothing, and the inferno grew, the flames licking his throat while they watched an infomercial. He sat on the floor only 2 feet from the television, like a knife that could slice a shoe in half was the most interesting thing in the world. Eventually, without saying a word, he stood up and went to the back door. He didn't see any kidnappers crouched behind bushes. No cops waiting for him, no doctors in lab coats, only blue skies and dew dotting the sliding glass door. He worried the Army of Acronyms could be hiding around the corner, but he couldn't stand the stale air of the house for one more second. The metal rails were sticky from years of non-use, so he had to push hard to get the glass door open enough to stand in the doorway. The relief was like pouring cold water on flames. The days had been sunny, and the world was alive but still cold. Birds chirped. "Take off your shirt," Gail said. "Let me feel it too." He pulled his t-shirt over his head, and she bounced up and down on his heart. The air nipped at his bare cage, and he shivered. Bare ribcage, and he shivered. The blue paint on the back steps was chipped and faded. Owen saw it like a ghost would, as a wide, uncrossable ocean, and so he stayed inside. A bird flew up and out of the neighbor's tree. It flew over the roof of the house and then back into the yard. It perched on the electric wire. Owen was cold, and he tugged on the door to close it, ready to go back inside. The door stuck on its rails, and he had to push it back open to get enough momentum to hop the sticky part. The bird flew down into the yard until it was nearly in front of him. He thought it an auspicious sign that he really should go back inside and not stay a second longer in the big, wide world. He pulled harder, but he couldn't get the door to budge. He was still wrestling with it when the bird flew up and over his head and into the house. No, 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 no. He followed the bird inside. No, 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 no. Oh shit, god damn it. No, 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 no. The bird fluttered near the ceiling and then to the television where it landed on top of the set. It was small but larger than Gail, maybe 5 inches long. Its belly was a soft white with dark brown feathers worn long down its wings. Owen stepped slowly towards the bird. He thought maybe he could get close enough to catch it, to hold it in his hands and take it outside. But when he got near it, it took off again and flew right at him. He ducked and the bird ran into the window and fell to the floor. It pulled itself up and careened into the glass again. "Close the blinds," Gail yelled. "This bird's an idiot." Owen pulled the blinds closed. The bird flew over his head into the kitchen, where it flitted from window to window. He ran around the house, closing each of the blinds, save for the pair that covered the back door that was still wide open. The bird hovered in the kitchen, wings beating. He worried it would stay there forever. Maybe his mom would come home and it would still be there, uncatchable. They'd have to walk around it, avoid it in the hallway. They'd live under the loose bird regime for years. Chill out. Gail poked her beak out between his ribs. It's just scared. He walked towards the bird slowly, his hands swept wide at each side. It flew towards him. He froze, ducked. It landed on the kitchen counter. "Get it towards the back door," Gail yelled. He walked around the bird, keeping his back to it. Once he was on the other side of the creature, he extended his hand and herded the bird towards the back door. It let him get within a couple feet before it flew up from the counter and over his head and out the door. He ran to the door. The bird flew high up into the sky, a celebration. Owen pulled his t-shirt back over his skinny body and followed the bird, stepping onto the back step without even realizing it. His awareness lagged behind his body, so it was a full beat before he realized he stood outside for the first time in a decade, exposed. The breeze blew long against his long hair and it startled him. He'd forgotten how long his hair had grown, tickling the tops of his shoulders now. He forgot how far the world stretched, past the neighbors, out towards the mountains, and once the world got past the mountains, it just kept going. He'd forgotten how tall the trees were and how it smelled differently outside. The desert sands brushed against his lungs, the fresh air so startling. He peeked around the side of the house, but still didn't see anyone waiting to steal him away, only packed mud and patches of dandelions. He stepped onto the back lawn. He had the impulse to spin, and so he did. The grass was long but heavy with frost, and it lay flat on the ground. It crunched beneath his feet. He stretched his arms out long and looked up to the sky, and the sun whirled around in a blur. He spun so fast. When he slowed down, he wobbled a bit, and Gail bumped into his spine and then ran into his ribs. He plopped down on the ground, drunk on dizziness and surprised by how sharp the earth was. He petted the grass, beads of dew wetted his fingertips. He stood up to walk to the corner of the yard. A dog barked. Gail wailed up inside of him, happiness brimming out of the hole in his chest. Oh, this guy thinks he owns the place, huh? She yelled. She chirped loudly, po-tweet, oh, tweet, 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 tweet. His nostrils pulled in the scent of pine. The earth still wobbled. Air swirled around him, full of microscopic bugs and atoms and emotions. He sneezed. He closed his eyes and passed Gail the feeling of a planet swirling beneath him, of his feet firmly in the soil and the air biting at his bare elbows. He thought of the Army of Acronyms and how bare he was outside, but then he imagined growing roots and standing tall like the trees around him. Open your eyes and it will seem bright as day. He imagined not being afraid of the Army of Acronyms. He imagined Gail living open and free and him living open and free in turn. The cold air sank past his skin and settled in his meat. He rubbed his neck. Let's get you inside, Gail said. Your mom's coming home soon. At the door, he turned and looked out across the yard one more time before sliding the glass door closed behind him. He and Gail collapsed on the couch. The television now played an infomercial for a ladder that fit under a sofa. He couldn't believe it. All those years and nobody was waiting to kidnap him, only fresh air and a world alive with sound and scent and color. The illusions of his mother's rules were shattered. He felt the bird all over the room. The house was different, contaminated, and he thought his mother would know as soon as she came home. She hadn't noticed, though. She came in swirling on beer like she always did. She kissed Owen on the forehead and ruffled his hair. She put on another pot of coffee. Later that night, Owen and his mother walked the house together. They made sure all the doors were locked tight. His mom wiggled the handles to test their stay-puttedness. They ensured the stove was off, fridge door was shut, and the lights were turned off. Owen shut the window in the dining room. His mother sang out goodnight to him and went into her bedroom to collapse on her bed. He hung her coat, placed her purse on the table, and straightened her shoes near the front door. He felt like a ghost, haunting her by picking up after her. I can stop there.
Thank you. I love reading. I guess that's the first time I've heard you read from it. So you know how it is. It's like when somebody, like when you go to a reading, it doesn't necessarily change the book, but it feels so different when it's like in the author's voice. It made me wonder if there's going to be an audiobook, and if there's going to be real bird recordings for Gail. Like that would be so cool.
There is an audiobook. It is available now. And the narrator is Nikki Indris, who's a fantastic actress. And I haven't listened to it yet, but I do not think there's real bird chirps, but I think Nikki makes all of the bird sounds herself.
Okay.
Which is pretty exciting. Yeah.
So like, as I mentioned earlier, how long had you been writing this book before, since before it was published?
Yeah, so I really started this book in 2013 in my time at Mills, which is where I met you, of course. Mills College was where I got my MFA. The first 50, 70 pages, something like that, were the basis for my thesis project at Mills. And I finished, my last draft before I started sending it out to agents in 2019. So it was about, probably close to 7 years that I was working on this book.
I ask because, like I said, with something with a project that has that kind of history, like I always wonder. I'm like this when I'm writing, like I mull for years and it takes me a long time. How did you know when it was done? How did you know when it was ready?
Who the hell knows when anything's done? I think, yeah, I don't know. I reached a point, I had sent it to you I sent it to another friend of mine, Zoe Tuck, who's a poet, looked at it too. And you guys gave me really great notes that I looked over and gave me some suggestions for how we can make it a stronger book. And I worked on it again, and I just kept moving it around. And I got to a place to where I felt like, I don't know, it had been 7 years. It was wrapped up in my mind in this way where I felt like I was like, at this point, it's, I think, good enough for the guidance of an agent I trust. And so then from there, it was a conversation I had with my agent, Cassie Manis Murray, who really gave me some excellent direction for shifting around some things, making the structure fit, pulling threads through. And then that conversation, we had a conversation, I think in May of 2020, that was like, I think it's ready for submission. So it's really just kind of vibes feeling, just being like, I feel like it's done, and then giving it to someone else and then being like, it's not done. And then getting it until, Cassie and I thought it was done, and then we went on submission and sold the book, and then it was another draft that I did with my editor Melanie at Atria. And then at a certain point, I was like, I think it's done, and everyone involved agreed. and
Yeah,
so then it went
feels
to
like
print.
it feels like a war of attrition sometimes with like the
Mhm.
creative process where you could just sit. I mean, at least for me, I could noodle forever. You know what I mean? But at some point, it has to be finished.
Yeah, I will without any external pressure. I will sit there. And even now, I love the book so much. It's exactly how it was supposed to be. But when I'll pick it up and read through, and I'm like, oh,
Pull the red pen
can
out.
I
You're like,
just
actually.
move this comma over? Should I, it's impossible not to at least tinker. But at a certain point, the tinkering, I don't think, is necessarily serving the story or the project, and we're better served to move on and tell another story.
Yeah. And as you like the other part about that creative process is like in my experience when I'm writing something longer form like a novel, I go into it with all of these ideas about um, inspirations and like other writers and other works that I'm thinking about. I have like a really solid idea of what that is. But then once it's done and I've had some distance from it, I look back and I'm discovering all of these other people that I'm in conversation with that I didn't really realize. Has that happened for you with this book? Or what are the authors and books that it has lineage with, and has that changed since it's been finished?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that for me, the book I return to time and time again whenever I was stuck with this book, and the book I really admired that made me want to write a queer coming of age story was Tom Spanbauer's Now Is the Hour. I mean, that book is so fantastic. It's about a queer boy living in rural Idaho in the 70s, and he just wants to get out of town. He just wants to leave. But there's a lot of joy in it. It's a fun book. He builds such a great community. This character, and I was always sort of astounded by the work. It always moved me, and so that's a book that I really kept returning to. Now that the book's out, I mean, I still think that those books are in conversation with each other. I mean, the review in the Oregonian this weekend compared my book to Tom Spanbauer's Now Is the Hour, which was like the greatest connection. It completely made my day, my week, my month. And the reviewer had no idea of that previous connection. So I'm really glad that came through. But I mean, there's other books out right now that I feel like are sort of circling my book that I didn't have the chance to read while I was writing it. Books like Casey Plett's A Dream of a Woman, it's a collection of short stories. To some extent, Kristen Arnett's With Teeth, which is a story about really difficult queer family and navigating a blood family like that. I think, yeah, there's so many great writers writing right now that are doing similar things. I mean, there's the magical elements. So I I hear comparisons to Zane Jukadar's 30 Names of, or 30 Names for Night, of course, and Karen Russell and Kelly Link, who I'm big fans of as well.
It's so cool when it like there's the stuff that's like really, you know, obvious, like the connection is really obvious, especially to you, but it's uncanny how there's also like this ether where these things are happening, where you can have a book that comes out and Casey can have it and Kristen, and they're, you know, they're kind of a birds of a feather together.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it feels like I'm doing something right when that happens. When I release something and other people are thinking about a similar thing and writing about similar issues that they're facing, it feels like I'm tapped into something, or there's some sort of ether or undercurrent that I'm a member of, that I'm getting these downloads from. Yeah, it's absolutely thrilling. It's one of my favorite experiences.
Speaking of like that kind of that undercurrent, you know, obviously like you're trans, like you have spoken about the relationship between your transness and a lot of what happens with this book, with Owen and with Gail. And even though it is a queer book and it's about queer people, and it deals with gender and sexuality in these like explicit ways, and there are these themes that are really familiar to us as queer people and trans people that, you know, maybe wouldn't even necessarily kind of be on the radar for like straight people. Owen's not a trans character, right?
Mm-hmm.
And neither for that matter is Gail, as far as we know. But there's so much conversation with writers like Casey and Tori Peters and Imogen Binney, where we are kind of coming into, or like Jackie S, right, where we're kind of coming into this space of a trans literature, the trans novel, trans renaissance, trans writing renaissance. Is this book a trans novel? What do you think of it in those terms?
I mean, nah. I don't know. I think I'm a trans person, and I wrote it. Because I wanted to capture this unique feeling that I felt my entire life. I felt like I was the only person who felt a certain way, and there was no way I could share it with other people, because sharing that with other people would put me in danger, would make me vulnerable. And there was no one who was talking about having these same feelings, which is explicitly the trans experience, I think. I think those of us, I mean, I'm in my 30s, I turned 37 this week. I grew up in the 90s. It was a very different time to grow up as a trans woman than it is now. And so I wanted to write about that. I also, to be perfectly honest, like came to understand my transness like in the middle, towards the end of writing this book. So I think, you know, the best books really teach the writers who are writing them a lot about themselves. They change the writers, and this book absolutely did that to me. Made me question and wonder what my secrets were, made me wonder what I could be sharing with myself, with the world, that would make me happier, that would make me feel more fulfilled. And through those questions led to the discovery that, and the acceptance that I'm a trans woman. So, I mean, I don't know. I think there was like 1 week where I was like, I'm going to rewrite the entire book, and Owen's going to be a trans woman, and and I just over and over was like, no, that's not Owen's story. You know, we leave Owen when he's 17, so maybe he comes out as trans later, but he doesn't in these pages. So, I mean, that's a tricky question. I think I'm a trans writer, and I was writing explicitly about the trans experience. Like, well, what in retrospect, it's explicitly about the trans experience. But I mean, there's not like real trans representation in this book. There aren't really trans people in this book. There's a lot of people who are fucking with their gender. there are people who are coming to understand themselves through their gender presentation, but they're not explicitly trans. So I think it depends on what your definition of like what quote unquote trans literature is. Yeah, I hope that trans literature starts to look weirder and less explicit sometimes, although I think it's important to tell stories explicitly. And I'm quite proud actually of the fact that I'm a trans author who is able to sell a book to a major publisher that is not explicitly about the trans experience, in the way that there are not trans characters transitioning and coming out and grappling with that. That's something I'm proud of. The next book I'm working on has a lot of explicitly trans characters, so we'll see how that comes along. But yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't even actually thought about that piece of it, where you were out and then selling this book that doesn't fit into, and like we could also, I mean, we could talk all day about the mold or what have you, but it is a really interesting the way that the book has shaped your life and vice versa, and how the kind of final product has come out. But speaking of what happens on the page versus off the page, like whether or not, as this book kind of developed, it's your knowledge of yourself might have changed, but this sensitivity to different kinds of oppression and repression is like very clear and very there, even if for some aspects of it you weren't quite aware yet how it applied to you. But it made me wonder about your process. Like when we're talking about, Owen is a terror, right? And he learns tiny bits of information about himself from no reliable sources, and he lives in fear, and he has very little information about who he is. And it made me wonder, did you do kind of like world building or research? Are there notes somewhere that gives you like more information about the terrors and what it's like for them? Did it just, do you get what I'm asking? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
were you building off of something, or was it kind of, again, more like vibes? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, whenever I'm writing, I ask a lot of questions. That's really my process. What is this? I try to give a character a problem. In this case, it was a boy who was born with a bird living inside of his chest. And then out of that, I was like, what problems does he face? What are his challenges? Well, his mom is rightfully paranoid of what could happen to him. So that made logical sense. And then, yeah, I of course, I started writing the book too. And there was a question of, are there other people with animals living inside of them? Which I think the book doesn't even quite answer. We're sort of left wondering at the end. Yeah, I think, I don't write notes. It's in a very frustrating way. My process is more talking out loud to myself. And I've tried to like do voice recording and stuff, but even that, I just never listened to it again. So the way I work through these problems and do sort of world build is drive around town, do my errands, and talk about the book. I have 2 dogs that I talk to a lot, who are tired of hearing about my books. But I just talk, and I try to figure out what problems they're facing, what sort of dangers there might be, what feelings come up when you feel that way. And so the whole book was built out of that. But I didn't like sit down. I don't plot. I don't, write out character maps or anything like that. I do the long-winded sit down and just write every day and see what happens.
Like Gretchen Felker Martin says, you take a little gay guy, and you give him a problem.
That's right. It's exactly what you do. My little gay guy's Owen, and he's got a big problem.
I think for me, the most interesting relationship in the book is the relationship between Owen and his mother. Not only because my new book is about a person with a twisted relationship with their mother, but I'm very fascinated by the ways in which we harm the people that we love, oftentimes despite ourselves. And you don't skirt around, Owen's mother is rightfully paranoid. There's no doubt about that. But you also don't skirt around the ways in which her behavior harms him really dramatically. But at the same time, you can feel that there is a lot of grace for her and for, even for like with Owen's uncle, like the way, people's avoidance or substance use affects other people. You don't prevent us from seeing how it impacts people, but you're also, like I said, having grace for those characters. Was that intentional? Am I reading too much into that? Like, what were you thinking about when you were kind of building this out?
No, I mean, whenever I write, I try to come towards every character with some sort of grace. Um, everyone messes up. Everyone does the wrong thing. We struggle with substance abuse. We struggle with neglect, all sorts of things. And I don't think there are quote unquote bad people. And that extends to my characters. I don't think there's a single bad person in this book. I don't think there's also coincidentally a single quote unquote good person in this book. I think they're all just human trying their best. Yeah, it was absolutely intentional. I thought, Janice cares for her son immensely. She wants to protect him from everything. But as we know, you cannot protect anyone from everything. We are meant to be in this world. We're meant to be out in this world, and that's how we find love. And so hiding someone away in order to protect them is not the way to do it. But she thinks she's doing the right thing. And it's also hard for her. She's 19 when she has Owen. She's a single mother. It's not easy to raise a baby by herself. Particularly, Owen is very sick. Throughout the book, he has asthma, and she struggles. She does her best, and it affects Owen. Of course, it affects Owen that his mother doesn't have the support she needs, and B is overprotective of him because she's scared for him. But yeah, that was always my intention, and is still always my intention. Every time I write, I try to extend a great amount of grace and compassion towards my characters, even when they're in the midst of messing up royally.
Totally. Yeah. And you can do that without having to without failing to kind of dig into the intricacies of these kinds of conflicts, like when you have a situation where a person loves someone very much and yet hurts them, or two people love each other very much and yet they hurt each other, like it's such fertile ground for writing into it and kind of obviously driving plot, but learning more about your characters. In one of the scenes toward the end of the book, sorry about spoiling and stuff, but one of the scenes that really stuck in my mind was when Owen goes to see his mom before he goes to California.
Mm-hmm.
And there's kind of she basically apologizes for, keeping him locked up in his home for 10 years and for all of these mistakes that she made. And she comes out to him also. And I wondered if, I guess I'm going back and forth. I was thinking about that scene a lot and going back and forth about it and wondering how the rest of the book would have played out if he hadn't had that moment with her, if she hadn't helped him to go to California, even though he had kind of this intent to end his life when he got there. Where do you, I guess that's a roundabout way of asking my question, which is, where do you think, does healing happen for him between Owen and Janice? And does it happen then? Does it happen later when he reconnects with Clyde? Do you have kind of thoughts about that?
Yeah, of course I have thoughts. Yeah, I think I don't think one conversation is enough to heal 17 years of intense trauma that Owen's faced. I think, even Janice in that conversation, she apologizes. She's trying to explain that she was doing her best while also struggling with her own issues. And I think that's good. I really wanted to give that moment for Owen, but sometimes it feels like it was more for Janice than it was for Owen. She still doesn't, I mean, in the end, he is still planning on leaving and going to California, and she's going to let him do it. Which I think, you know, she's maybe learning a lesson about protecting him and learning she can't protect him all the time, but also she doesn't really try to stop him. And I think, yeah, when their relationship is so complicated as relationships are in general. And I think he has a lot of love for his mother. I think he really cares for her and understands that she's just trying to protect him. But also I think she's done some pretty serious damage. I mean, he is so paranoid. He's afraid to talk to anyone. He's afraid to be vulnerable with anyone. And I think, you know, what I like best about that scene is sort of the way that context can be given to relationships, and that Owen struggles, and it's real trauma that he's faced. It's real. I mean, some folks have called it abuse that he faces from his mother. But when Clyde shows up, he's just happy that she isn't angry at him for being gay. Right? That's just this, like, for him it's just incomprehensible that even a mother would love their child who's an out queer person. So add some context to that relationship. Again, that doesn't erase anything, and if that's our bar, the bar is, you know, in the floor. But I do think that, yeah, I think there's some healing there, but I don't think it's enough to completely heal their relationship. I don't know if they really talk a whole lot shortly after that or not.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I feel that I would be willing to say that that was an abusive relationship, but I mean, the way that you render it with the complexity it deserves. But I mean, I think too, like one of the ways why that kind of seems a little bit, why their relationship seems a little bit you know, difficult to paint one way or another is because of the way that well, first of all, there is a lot of humor and lightheartedness even in like the darker parts. Like you're able to kind of do those things at the same time, but also in the midst of this pain and fear and confusion and paranoia, there are lots of moments of real pleasure, real physical pleasure that Owen finds and experiences. And it's, am I right in saying that, you know, you were writing Owen as being able to find pleasure in danger? A scene that comes to mind is when we had emailed about this earlier, but him masturbating while he's thinking about the stinging jellyfish that he sees on the beach. Like, is that something that was crossing your mind when you were putting all of that together for him?
Yeah, I think, I mean, first of all, Owen has only known pleasure or only known danger, I think, for much of his life, a like sort of shadowy danger. And I think that he's you know, he's a teenager, 14, 15, 16, 17. So there's a lot of masturbation scenes in general in this book. But I think that one of the things I wanted to capture was what it could feel like to maybe flip danger on its head, and instead of it being something that made him scared to be vulnerable with someone, that the prospect of danger, that instead he did find pleasure in it, that he was able to find joy in the thought of danger and the thought of like some pain. He talks a lot about the stinging of he gets stung by a jellyfish, and he's thinking about it later when he's masturbating, and that's really, yeah, I wanted to capture those moments when you're maybe 15 or 16 years old and you're exploring your body and you're trying to find the things that excite you. He's kind of meandering around in his mind while he's masturbating, trying to settle on images and feelings that excite him. And time again, it's danger. It's also tenderness and love and a weight of a body. But yeah, there's of course some danger in there too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's easy to forget, or it's not easy to forget, but it's not simply a book about a young queer kid. It's also a book about a queer kid with this additional problem. And so in a way, it's almost like that kind of supersedes the dangers from the Army of Acronyms is actually supersedes the dangers he faces just as like a queer kid or a gay kid or and so it almost, the perspective almost makes it seem like his little LGBT problem is not that big of a deal. But
Yeah,
maybe
that
terrors to the acronym LGBT.
LGBTT.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was my whole reason for giving him a bird in his chest, was I wanted to write a queer coming of age story that didn't focus on queerness as the main issue. I was like, I want to write a coming of age queer book where the protagonist is queer, but it's not their biggest issue. It doesn't come like, he doesn't even really almost struggle with his sexuality. It just is sort of a fact for him. And that's because he has a bird living inside of his chest that is a much more terrifying aspect of him that could get out. And so he's so focused on that you're right. Yeah, the queerness, he's just sort of like, yeah, whatever. I like who I like.
Why coming of age? Like, is that just because, is there a reason why you were drawn to that kind of structure?
Yeah, I was thinking about my own time at this age. I think I really enjoy coming of age novels, and sometimes I think they could be done better. And so I wanted to write one that I felt was more aligned with maybe not my experience, but what I thought my experience could have been had I had a more queer community in my life. Yeah, I've always enjoyed reading coming of age books, and was just really, when I was writing this, was thinking a lot about, of course, my own gender and sexuality, and that those struggles all started for me when I was Owen's age, when I was 13 and 14, and through high school. And so that was the time I was writing about.
My last question, zooming out a little bit. I mean, we've known each other for a decade now, and my association with you is first as a writer, but as an artist, like you're multidisciplinary, very communal. Like we were talking about that reading series that you had in your yard, but ever since I've known you, there has often been other dimensions to your creativity. I was thinking about the sacred text of Rosa, who's great, and how there was, which was a book that Em did with Stello that was also performance based, and there were like interactive elements. And I guess I wonder, can you imagine that kind of afterlife happening for this book as well? I mean, do you have any other plans like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have plans, but I would love to have plans like that. I think, we're currently trying to find anyone who's interested in optioning screen rights, which would be a medium I would be so delighted to see Owen's story transferred to. I have, some wild dreams of like a Broadway play, or some wild thing that would be so cool to see a set a live action thing acted out. My agent and I always joke about a theme park, a Owen and Gail theme park with roller coasters and everything. Yeah, I mean, I think you know me. I'm just always thinking of ways to expand stories and expand art. Yeah, Rosa was so much fun. My wife and I built these like canvas tents out of PVC pipe and hand sewn fabric, and my wife painted the inside of them like scenes from the book. And when we did our book launch, you could like crawl inside and like experience Rosa's experience. I mean,
And there were prayer books so that you participants were, viewers were also participants, and you could like read from them. And like, it was, yeah, it was super cool. And I feel like this would be very easily adapted for the screen or a theme park. So
let's talk. I'll have my people call your people.
yeah, well, let's make those are my questions. I don't do we go to the Q&A section?
Yeah, let's see if some folks have written some questions. If anyone has questions now, please write them in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's one in here, so you guys still have time if you're sitting on something, but I'll ask this first one. Anonymous asks, is there potential for more books in this world, like books about other terrors especially? It's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do, yeah, there's absolutely a possibility of writing another book that follows. Even, I would even like to stick with Owen and Gail too. I think it would be so cool to see what Owen is doing when he is in his 30s and has maybe like learned to live with this bird inside of his chest for a little bit longer. I do dream about, you know, I've thought it would be cool to do like a interconnected collection of stories that follows, like, you know, 12 different terrors. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's, I mean, I feel like I'm not quite done with the world, and maybe that's because it's book launch and the book came out yesterday, and so it's still feeling very fresh to me. But I would like to do more with this world and with Owen and Gail. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just as an aside, I feel like the way that you do such a great job with aging him through like his formative years. So I'd be so curious to see what you would do through more formative periods, like his messy 20s. The next question.
So messy.
He'd be messy, but we still love it. In what ways, Anonymous asks, in what ways did you center queer joy throughout the novel?
I mean, queer joy was one of the reasons I wrote the novel. I really wanted to write a coming of age story that wasn't centered on coming out, that wasn't centered on queer pain and bullying and all the stories. I mean, wonderful stories, but the stories we've seen before. My own experience coming out to my group of friends, both as a queer person and as a trans woman, has been nothing but liberating and full of celebration, thanks to people like you, Davey. And so it was, shout out, it made sense to me to center queer joy. And so that was always sort of the center. If I ever got lost in the story, if I ever felt like I was losing course, I thought about how we tend to seek joy, how we tend to find joy when we look for it. And so I just tried to give Owen so many moments of queer joy, of finding community and family who love him, of finding music that means something to him, of just experiencing the world. Yeah, that was really the basis for writing the whole book. And so I just kept coming back to it.
Yeah, I feel like that really comes through.
Good.
Next question's from Stella. They're asking, if each of us had a terror inside of us, what kind of animal would it be and where would it reside? I actually haven't thought about the location being optional, but what would yours be?
I've thought a lot about this, including location. I think, honestly, I would have a salamander in my ass. Be like one of salamander, yeah, right in maybe my right butt cheek. And I can't quite ever see them. You know, Owen gets to like look in the mirror and see a Gail and kind of talk to her. I would never really get that option unless I had a mirror and was like squatting over it. But yeah, I would have a sort of dour salamander hidden in my ass cheek.
I promise you I would never have guessed that in a movie.
What about you, Davey?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, mine would probably be a bird. I'm a big fan of birds.
Same.
I mean, a chicken. You can't lose with a chicken. They're delightful. They're beautiful.
Would it be full size or shrunk down?
Oh, good question. I guess if it was full size, I mean, I could fit it. I've been working out. I could fit a whole
You'd
chicken
make it
in
work.
here.
You'd squeeze a chicken in there.
I would. It'd probably have to be in here, but I could do
Yeah.
it.
You got the gumption. I think you could do it.
Yeah, she's right. I can feel it. It would work for me.
Excellent.
Let's see. Coleman asks, how do you feel about your book as a physical object now that it's out in the world? Were you able to participate in choosing the cover, art, and design? It's lovely. Agreed. It's very lovely.
Thank you so much. I also agree, and it is lovely. I participated in as much as authors get to participate in the cover design. I sent an email to my editor kind of early on, right after I turned in the book, that was just full of vibes I thought the cover could have. I think I said something like, let's maybe not have a bird inside someone's chest, because it seemed like such an obvious thing, especially when that's the title. I was like, what if we had something with the ocean, or there's some flowers that glow in the book, and I was like, maybe there's glowing feather or flowers, I don't know. And then it was all vibes. It was really just like, I don't know, maybe blues and teals. I sent a picture of Saturn, included a picture of the planet Saturn, and was like, this is cool. And there were some things I didn't want, like a bird inside a chest. But also I was like, let's not do like trans flag colors. Let's not do pride colors. I didn't think that was anything they would ever do, but I wanted to be explicit about it.
You never know.
Yeah, I was just like, just to be clear, we're not doing this, right? But I also was very clear that I am in no way a visual artist. I do not even begin to understand how book designers and cover designers work. And so I was like, I'm really just excited to see what they come up with after reading the book. And it was
same. That's all a mystery to me.
Yeah, I'm like, here are vibes. I don't know. And they just really, I was so blown away by the cover. It was such a delight to see, first on my phone. I think I was like in a parking lot of a grocery store or something when it first came through, almost a year ago now, and just weeping happy tears. Seeing the physical book has just been incredible. It's so lovely. It's got some embossed lettering on the cover. It's really special to see something like that, especially as someone who's been a writer my whole life. I've been writing since I was 14 years old, and I've always wanted to write books. I went around town yesterday and I signed stock here at bookstores here in Portland, and met with some booksellers who were all just so thrilled to have me and have my book on the shelves. And that was just such a lovely experience. I mean, a literal dream come true. Absolutely. Just so astonishing to see something that you've worked on for nearly 10 years now, 9 years, come out and be released and be out of my hands and into the world.
Well, I hope you're proud. It's a lot to be proud of.
I am. Thank you. Thank you, Davey. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions.
No questions?
Oh, wait a minute. Yes, we have another one from Anonymous. I actually almost asked this question, so I'm glad that somebody else is. Can you speak about the role that water plays in your book and why it's so important to the story?
Yeah, so water plays a huge role in the book. Owen feels drawn to the water. He is born at the exact moment of the beginning of this great flood. And there's this kind of town folklore at the beginning of the book that if you watch the water flood over the bridge at the exact moment, there's a bridge that floods every year. And if you see the exact moment the water floods the bridge, then you'll have good luck for the year. And so the whole town gathers and watches this bridge flood. And Owen's mother goes to see the bridge flood and ends up giving birth to him while at the exact moment. And so he is born during the flood in March as a Pisces, and he's just always drawn to water. His mother considers him to be the luckiest boy in the whole world because of that. And I think I agree with her in that sense. He is very lucky. But yeah, I think water is something that I am particularly fond of as an element. And I think that it's so powerful. I live here on the West Coast and love to go to the coast. I spent a lot of time growing up. I went to Puget Sound every summer where my grandfather lives and spent a lot of time next to the water. Yeah, I have always felt a personal connection to large bodies of water. And so I just kind of transferred that over to Owen. But yeah, he feels at home when he's next to the water, so at home that he wants to crawl in and maybe just live underwater for the rest of his life.
Maybe that, well, if there are other terrors and they have marine or amphibian lives inside of them, maybe that's something that can happen in another.
Oh yeah, they let them breathe underwater. Yeah. I like that.
One last question. I don't know if we have time, but the question is from Anonymous. What made you decide to go to Mills College?
Good question. I mean, I loved my time at Mills. I applied to a number of grad schools. Each one I was excited about. I made sure I loved the faculty that were on board. I made sure they were, for the most part, in locations that I would be happy with like Iowa City aside, which I didn't get into Iowa, so we're good there. And I just really, honestly, they were one of the few schools who accepted me and gave me money. The other one was New School, which I was like, do I want New York? And I had been waitlisted, so I wasn't even sure I would go there. So it just made sense. And I'm grateful I went. I had a lovely time there. The campus, as you know, Davey, is absolutely stunning. I love the fact that the undergrad, it's a women's only college. And that was something that the students continually fought for. There's a lot of activism at Mills that I was proud to be there during. Yeah, unfortunately, Mills is not a degree granting college anymore as of like this year. It seems, according to their board, they're out of funds and they're not going to be. They're part of a Northeastern now. But yeah, I enjoyed my time there, and yeah, who knows why we go to grad school? We just, the ones that let us in and give us some money and have some teachers we want to work with.
Well, that was the last question.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This is so nice. It was so nice to talk to you. And it feels like for me, like a kind of like a coda, you know what I mean? Of course, we'll still continue to be friends.
I hope so. I hope this isn't the season wrap on our friendship.
No, it's not the end, but it does feel very fitting. It's in it. And like I said, I'm really proud of you. It's just so exciting. And I'm glad I got to talk to you before you got sick of talking about your book yet.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever be sick of it, but I'm definitely not sick of it now. And I knew when we were setting up events, I was like, well, Davey and I gotta talk, because Lydia and I were talking about it last night. We're like, Lydia Keesing and I did an event together, who Lydia knows Davey as well. And I was like, Davey's just so easy to talk to. And we used to, in Oakland, we would like go to the bar and hang out on the patio for 4 hours and just gab. And just, it was so much fun talking about writing and everything with you. So I'm grateful we got to do it again on screen.
Thank you so much, both of you, Davey and Em. This is the book, The Boy with a Bird in His Chest. I just posted the link to it again in the chat, so click on that and get copies from us. Em was here yesterday and signed, I think, pretty much all the books that we had, so you'll probably get a signed copy if you order from us. One thing I just noticed, Em, is that if you turn the book this way, there's like a face right here.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
This is Davey's book right here. Davey, excited about your book coming out later this year too. Thanks everyone for tuning in at home, and thanks again, Davey and Em. And what else? Oh yeah, here's one more link I was gonna put in the chat. This is to our YouTube channel. This event was recorded and it will be showing up on our YouTube page tomorrow. So if you have friends that missed it, feel free to share that link with them. And yeah, you can check out all of our other past events, Zoom events there as well. We've done a lot. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Davey. Thanks, Kevin and Powell. Appreciate you all.
You're welcome.